We sold our house for $380,000. She said it was an investment. The money went to her boyfriend to open a restaurant. Part 1. The Sale. 6 months ago, my wife and I sold our house. Our house. The one we'd lived in for 12 years. The one where we'd celebrated anniversaries, hosted Thanksgivings, built a life I thought was solid and real. The house was worth $380,000, and we owned it free and clear, paid off the mortgage 2 years early because my wife was always so good with money. At least, that's what I believed. I'm 40 years old, and I've spent the last 2 decades working as a project manager for a construction company. Long hours, decent pay, steady career. My wife, 38, worked part-time as a bookkeeper for several small businesses. She handled our finances because, frankly, she was better at it than me. I trusted her completely. That trust was the foundation of our marriage. Looking back, I can see exactly how she did it. The conversation started about 18 months ago, casual at first. Comments about how we were house poor. How our money was just sitting there, locked up in equity we couldn't touch. How other people were getting rich through investments while we were stuck in the same suburban neighborhood, watching our neighbors upgrade their lives. I've been reading about commercial real estate development, she said one evening, her laptop open at the kitchen table. The returns are incredible. 10–15% annually. Way better than just sitting on a house that appreciates 3% a year if we're lucky. I nodded, only half listening. I was tired from work, and she'd always handled these things. There's this development company, she continued. They pool investor money to build commercial properties, strip malls, office buildings, that kind of thing. Minimum investment is substantial, but the returns. She showed me some numbers on her screen. Impressive projections. Official-looking documents. Over the following months, she kept bringing it up. Never pushy, just persistent. She'd leave articles about real estate investing on the coffee table. Mention friends of friends who'd made fortunes. Talk about how we could finally take that European vacation, pay for our hypothetical kids' college funds, retire early. We never had kids. Another conversation we kept postponing. If we sold the house, she finally said one night, we could invest the whole amount. $380,000 working for us instead of just sitting there. In 5 years, we could buy an even better house. Cash. I had reservations. That house was our security, our anchor. But she had answers for everything. We'd rent temporarily, just until the first returns came in. The investment was diversified, safe. She'd done all the research. Trust me, she said, taking my hands in hers. This will change our lives. She was right about that, at least. The sale happened fast. My wife handled everything, the listing, the showings, the paperwork. I was in the middle of a massive project at work, overseeing the construction of a new hospital wing. 60-hour weeks, constant stress. I was grateful she was taking care of things at home. Just sign here, she'd say, sliding documents across the table. And here. Initial here. I signed where she told me to sign. I didn't read the fine print. I didn't ask questions. Why would I? She was my wife. We'd been together for 15 years, married for 12. She'd never given me any reason to doubt her. The house sold for $382,000, slightly above asking. I remember feeling relieved, even optimistic. My wife beamed when she told me about the final number. See? I told you this was the right move. The money went into what she called our investment account. I never saw the statements. They're digital, she explained. I have everything organized. You focus on work, I've got this covered. So I focused on work. We moved into a 2-bedroom apartment that she said was temporary. The rent was reasonable. The neighborhood was fine. It felt like we were in a holding pattern, waiting for our real life to begin. I trusted her with everything. She handled the sale, the paperwork, the money. I never questioned it. I signed where she told me to sign. That's the sentence that keeps echoing in my head now. The one that makes me feel like the biggest fool alive. Update 1. The questions begin 3 months after the sale. The first crack appeared 3 months in. I asked my wife about the investment, when we might see our first return, whether there were quarterly statements I could review. These things take time, she said, not looking up from her phone. Commercial development isn't like the stock market. It's slow money, patient money. I'd still like to see the paperwork, just to understand how it works. It's complicated financial documents. You'd find it boring. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Trust me, I'm on top of it. I wanted to trust her. I really did. But something felt off. She'd become more secretive with her phone. Started going to networking events in the evenings. Took more weekend trips to visit her college friend 2 hours away. At night, lying next to her in the dark, I felt a distance between us that hadn't been there before. Or maybe it had always been there, and I was just finally noticing. Update 2. The discovery, 6 months after the sale. 6 months after the sale, I finally pushed. I told my wife I wanted to see the investment statements. All of them. I wanted to know exactly where our money was and what it was doing. She got defensive immediately. Why are you suddenly questioning me? Don't you trust me? I want to see the paperwork, I repeated. That's not unreasonable. Fine, she snapped. I'll get you the statements. But you're being paranoid for no reason. She never got me those statements. The next day, while she was at work, I found the name of the investment company she'd mentioned months ago in our email correspondence. Sterling Commercial Partners. I called them. I'm sorry, sir, the receptionist said after putting me on hold for several minutes. We have no record of any investment account under your name. Or your wife's name. Are you sure you have the right company? My heart stopped. Literally felt like it seized in my chest. There must be a mistake, I said. My wife invested $380,000 with you 6 months ago. More checking. More holding. Then, sir, I've spoken with our account managers. We have no record of your wife ever contacting us, and no investment of that amount, or any amount, in either of your names. I don't know what to tell you. I hung up and sat in the silence of our rented apartment for a long time. Then I started searching. I confronted her that night. She denied everything at first. Said I must have called the wrong company. Said there was probably a clerical error. Said I was overreacting. Then I told her I'd hired a lawyer. Her face changed. The mask slipped for just a moment, and I saw something underneath that I'd never seen in 15 years together. Fear. Calculation. The cold, quick thinking of someone whose scheme had just unraveled. You don't need a lawyer, she said, her voice tight. We can figure this out ourselves. I want to see every bank statement from the past year. Every transaction from the house sale account. Everything. She refused. My lawyer filed a motion. The court ordered financial disclosure. That's when I learned the truth. The $380,000 from the sale of our house, the home we'd built together over 12 years, had been transferred to an account I'd never heard of. The account belonged to a man I'd never met. A man whose name my wife had never mentioned in 15 years of marriage. Her lover. They'd been together for 3 years. 3 years. While I was working 60-hour weeks, building a career, trusting her with our finances and our future, she was sleeping with someone else. Planning a future with someone else. Using me as a piggy bank for their dreams. The money had gone to open a restaurant. A trendy bistro in a gentrifying neighborhood downtown. The kind of place with exposed brick, craft cocktails, and a menu that changed seasonally. My wife was listed as co-owner. $380,000. Our entire life savings. Every dollar we'd built over 12 years. All of it, funding her lover's dream restaurant. Their romantic venture. Their shared future. For 6 months she looked me in the eye and lied. The investment takes time. There was no investment. Just her and him planning their future with my money. We sold our house, for $380,000. She said it was an investment. The money went to her boyfriend to open a restaurant. I was renting a 2-bedroom apartment while they were building their dreams together. While they were probably laughing about how gullible I was. How trusting. How easy to fool. That house was paid off. We owned it free and clear. She convinced me to sell it so her lover could open a bistro. I'm living in a rental. He's living my dream. Update 3. The investigation deepens, 2 months after discovery. My lawyer was methodical. Cold. Exactly what I needed. We're going to get your money back, she told me at our first meeting after the financial disclosure. What your wife did, this isn't just divorce territory. This is criminal fraud. She started digging. Subpoenaed emails. Bank records. Business formation documents. What she found was worse than I'd imagined. My wife hadn't just taken the money. She'd created an elaborate fiction to cover her tracks. Sterling Commercial Partners, the investment company she'd told me about? It existed, but only on paper. She'd registered a shell company with a similar name, created a professional-looking website, printed official documents with their logo. She forged documents, made fake investment contracts, created a whole company that didn't exist, all to steal $380,000 from her own husband. The fake investment contracts had my signature on them, but the documents themselves were fabricated. Professional-looking forgeries that made it appear I'd knowingly invested in a legitimate company. If I tried to claim fraud, she could have pointed to those contracts and said I knew exactly where the money was going. She'd thought of everything. Almost. What she hadn't anticipated was that I'd actually try to contact the real Sterling commercial partners. That one phone call had unraveled years of careful planning. My lawyer also found evidence of how she and her lover had communicated. A separate email account. A burner phone. They'd been meticulous about keeping their affair hidden, but once we had access to financial records, the trail became clear. There were conversations about the restaurant, their baby, they called it. Discussions about the menu, the decor, the location. Plans for grand opening. Plans for their future together. And scattered throughout, cold, calculating discussions about me. He's so trusting it's almost sad, my wife had written in one email. Signs whatever I put in front of him. Never asks questions. Sometimes I feel guilty, but then I remember how boring he is. How stuck in his ways. He deserves what's coming. That email was read aloud in court later. I still remember every word. I also learned more about the lover. A man 6 years younger than me, with a dream of owning a restaurant but no capital to make it happen. He'd met my wife at a business networking event 3 years ago. She was doing bookkeeping for a client of his at the time. According to the email trail, their affair started within weeks of that first meeting. Within months, they were planning their future together. The restaurant idea came first. He'd always wanted to own one. She had access to capital, meaning me. The scheme to steal the house money came later, developed over more than a year of careful planning. They'd picked the restaurant location together, designed the menu together, chosen the name, a French word meaning new beginnings. The irony was apparently lost on them. The restaurant had opened 4 months after they'd taken my money. It was getting positive reviews, building a regular clientele. My wife spent most of her networking evenings and visits to her college friend there, working alongside her lover, building the life she'd stolen from me. I drove past it once, just to see. It was exactly the kind of place I would have hated, pretentious, expensive, full of people who thought they were more sophisticated than everyone else. But it was successful. Busy. My money had built something real. That was the hardest part, somehow. Knowing that my sacrifice had actually worked. That their theft had paid off. At least, it had paid off so far. Update 4. Justice begins, 4 months after discovery. My lawyer was relentless. Within 4 months of discovering the fraud, we compiled enough evidence to pursue criminal charges. The district attorney took the case. Fraud charges were filed against both my wife and her lover. Theft by deception. Forgery. Conspiracy. The combined charges carried potential sentences of up to 10 years. I wasn't there for her arrest. My lawyer advised against it, but I heard about it later. They picked her up at the restaurant, in front of the lunch crowd. Her lover was arrested the same day, at his apartment. The apartment they'd been planning to share once my divorce was finalized. The restaurant was seized as proceeds of crime. Padlocked overnight, with all those fancy tables and that carefully curated wine list locked inside. The employees found out via text message that they no longer had jobs. I felt bad for them. They hadn't done anything wrong. They were just collateral damage in my wife's scheme. The criminal trial took 8 months. 8 months of lawyers and witnesses and documents and testimony. 8 months of sitting in a courtroom watching my wife try to minimize what she'd done. Her defense was predictable. She claimed the investment scheme was real, that she genuinely believed in the restaurant as a legitimate business opportunity. She claimed I'd known about the relationship, that we'd had an arrangement. She claimed the money was hers as much as mine, that she'd earned it through years of managing our household. None of it held up. The forged documents were the key. Expert witnesses confirmed that the fake investment contracts had been created using software on my wife's personal laptop. The timeline showed they'd been fabricated after the money was transferred, designed to provide cover if questions arose. She'd created fake email confirmations from Sterling commercial partners. Fake quarterly statements showing fictional returns. A whole paper trail designed to make me think my money was working for me while it was actually funding their restaurant. The jury deliberated for less than a day. Guilty on all charges. Both of them. My wife was sentenced to 2 years in state prison for fraud and forgery. Her lover got 18 months for his role in the conspiracy. The judge called their scheme a calculated betrayal of the most fundamental trust in a marriage, and a textbook example of financial exploitation. I watched them being led away in handcuffs. My wife didn't look at me. Her lover did, a brief glance full of something I couldn't quite read. Hatred, regret, fear. I didn't care anymore. The civil judgment came separately. $380,000 plus damages for emotional distress and the costs of the legal proceedings. Total judgment, $445,000. Neither of them could pay, of course. The restaurant was gone, seized and eventually auctioned off. Their personal savings had been minimal. They'd invested everything in their dream, and now that dream was ashes. But my lawyer was thorough. Asset seizure proceedings went after everything they had. Cars, bank accounts, personal property, even the furniture from the apartment they'd planned to share. In the end, I recovered about $200,000. Less than half of what they'd taken, but more than I'd expected to see again. Update 5, 2 years later, final update. It's been 2 years since I discovered the fraud. 2 years since my world collapsed and then slowly, painfully, rebuilt itself. My wife served her full sentence, no early release for good behavior. I heard through mutual friends that prison changed her. That the woman who emerged after 2 years was quieter, diminished, nothing like the confident schemer who'd orchestrated the theft. She's out now, living with her sister in another state. I don't know what she does for work, and I don't care to find out. Her lover served his 18 months and then disappeared. Someone told me he moved to the West Coast, started working as a line cook in someone else's kitchen. The dream of owning his own place died with the bistro. I doubt he'll ever have the capital, or the nerve, to try again. The restaurant itself went through 2 more owners after the seizure auction. Both failed. The space is a yoga studio now, I think. Or maybe a dry cleaner. I don't drive past anymore. As for me, I used the $200,000 to buy a smaller house in a quieter neighborhood. Paid cash. No mortgage, no debt, no exposure to anyone else's decisions about my money. The house has 2 bedrooms, a small yard, and a view of a park where I sometimes sit on weekend mornings with a cup of coffee, watching kids play soccer. I'm not the same person I was before. I don't trust the same way I used to. Every relationship, every financial decision, every document I sign, I question it now. I read the fine print. I verify independently. I protect myself. Some people might call that paranoid. I call it learned wisdom. I've thought a lot about what happened. About the warning signs I missed, the questions I didn't ask, the trust one gave away so freely. I've wondered if there were moments where I could have stopped it. Conversations where a different question, a different level of attention, might have exposed the scheme before it was too late. But I've also realized that you can't protect yourself from someone who's truly determined to betray you. Not without becoming someone you don't want to be. I gave my wife my trust because that's what marriage is supposed to be. She exploited that trust because that's who she really was. The failure wasn't mine. I dated briefly, about a year after the divorce was finalized. A kind woman I met through work recently divorced herself. We went to dinner a few times, saw a movie, had pleasant conversations about safe topics. But I wasn't ready. Maybe I'm still not ready. The walls I've built aren't coming down easily. That's okay. I'm learning to be comfortable alone. To find satisfaction in small things, a well-cooked meal, a book that captures my attention, a morning where I wake up with nothing hanging over my head. Peace, it turns out, is underrated. Sometimes people ask me if I'm angry. If I hate my ex-wife, if I wish worse things had happened to her than a 2-year prison sentence and a bankrupted future. The honest answer is, I was angry. For a long time. The first year after the discovery was consumed by fury, a constant, burning rage at what she'd done, at how thoroughly she'd betrayed me, at the casual cruelty of those emails where she called me boring and said I deserved it. But anger is exhausting. It takes energy that I need for other things. Somewhere along the way, it burned itself out, leaving something cooler in its place. Not forgiveness exactly. More like indifference. She doesn't occupy space in my head anymore. She's just someone who used to be in my life, someone who made choices that destroyed her own future as thoroughly as she tried to destroy mine. The last thing I heard about her, she was working part-time at a retail store, living in her sister's basement, struggling to rebuild any kind of life with a fraud conviction on her record. The sophisticated schemer who created fake companies and forged investment documents, reduced to folding clothes and asking if customers need help finding their size. I don't take pleasure in that. But I don't feel sorry for her either. She made her choices. She's living with them. I've started thinking about the future again. Not in the big, ambitious way I used to, no more dreams of European vacations or early retirement. But in smaller ways. Maybe I'll travel somewhere next year. Maybe I'll get a dog. Maybe I'll finally learn to cook something more complicated than pasta. My financial advisor, yes, I have one now, someone who provides outside verification of everything, says I'm on track for a comfortable retirement if I keep living modestly. The smaller house means lower costs. The cash purchase means no mortgage payments. I'm saving money for the first time in years. It's not the life I planned. But it's a life. The story people seem to want is one of triumph. Of the cheated husband who rises from the ashes, finds new love, builds something even better than what was taken. And maybe that story will come eventually. Maybe there's a chapter still unwritten where I meet someone who reminds me that trust doesn't always lead to betrayal. But for now, the story I have is simpler. I survived. I recovered what I could. I rebuilt what I was able to rebuild. She sold our house to fund her affair. She thought she was investing in her future. Instead, she invested in prison time. Some investments have negative returns. She learned that the expensive way. And I learned something too. That the life we build is only as solid as the people we build it with. That trust is valuable precisely because it can be broken. That sometimes the most strategic response to betrayal isn't revenge. It's simply the patient, methodical work of holding people accountable and then moving forward. The bistro is a yoga studio now. My wife is folding clothes in a discount store. Her lover is scrubbing dishes in someone else's kitchen. And I'm sitting on the porch of a house I own free and clear, drinking coffee in the morning sun, watching children play in the park across the street. Some mornings, that feels like victory enough. TLDR, my wife convinced me to sell our paid-off house for a fake investment opportunity. The $380,000 went to her secret lover of 3 years to open a restaurant. Discovered the fraud when I contacted the investment company that had no record of us. Court-ordered disclosure revealed forged documents and the whole scheme. Both were charged with fraud, theft, forgery, and conspiracy. Wife got 2 years in prison, lover got 18 months. Restaurant seized. Recovered $200,000 through asset seizure. Bought a smaller house, cash. 2 years later, I'm rebuilding my life. She's living in her sister's basement working retail. Some investments have negative returns. Here's what I learned about trust. You can't protect yourself from someone determined to betray you without becoming someone you don't want to be. The failure wasn't mine. We sold our house, for $380,000. She said it was an investment. The money went to her boyfriend to open a restaurant. I trusted her with everything. She handled the sale, the paperwork, the money. I never questioned it. I signed where she told me to sign. For 6 months she looked me in the eye and lied. The investment takes time. There was no investment. Just her and him planning their future with MY money. That house was paid off. We owned it free and clear. She convinced me to sell it so her lover could open a bistro. I'm living in a rental. He's living my dream. She forged documents. Made fake investment contracts. Created a whole company that didn't exist. All to steal $380,000 from her own husband. Her email, he's so trusting it's almost sad. Signs whatever I put in front of him. He deserves what's coming. Criminal charges, fraud, theft, forgery, conspiracy. Restaurant seized. Wife, 2 years prison. Lover, 18 months. I recovered $200,000 through asset seizure. Bought a smaller house, cash. 2 years later, she's folding clothes in retail, living in her sister's basement. He's washing dishes in someone else's kitchen. The bistro is a yoga studio now. She sold our house to fund her affair. She thought she was investing in her future. Instead, she invested in prison time. Some investments have negative returns. She learned that the expensive way.